A lot of inspiring and uplifting music. And I hope that's true too of our scripture reading today. It comes from the Gospel of Mark. Ellie's going to read it for us today. Ellie?
Yeah, it comes from the chapter 2, verses 18 to 22. And the Word of God says, "Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. Some people came and asked Jesus, 'How is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but yours are not?' Jesus answered, 'How can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast. No one sews a patch of new fabric on an old garment. Otherwise, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be destroyed. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins.'" May God bless the reading of His Word.
Amen. All right, well, I'm always gets my attention whenever Jesus or in the Gospels or in the Bible we hear about wine. Because that's always an interest to me about wine. I'm not a big wine drinker, but I tell you, I know a lot of people who love to have a glass of wine. It's something that really feeds them. And one thing that's we have to be careful of when we hear these, and especially this little description of what our faith is like, is this idea of new wine. Because I always thought, growing up, like I said, I don't know much about wine, but I always thought that the old wine was the good wine. Right? That the 61 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, whatever it is, they're always pulling out in the movies, right? It's always old. And that's the best wine. It's certainly the most valuable. And there's no doubt about that. Today, if you want to buy an expensive bottle of wine, it's going to be an old bottle of wine, usually from France. An old bottle, and that's more valuable. But we have to remember that back in Jesus' day, the new wine was more precious than the old wine. The new wine was precious. It was what people wanted. We hear this throughout the Gospels. In fact, when Isaac or when Jacob blessed his son, so he was giving his son his blessing for the rest of his life. And he said to him, "May God provide you with abundant grain and with new wine." That was the blessing of a father to his son. May God give you new wine. So this is a gift. Not only is this a blessing, it's something that people liked and something that people wanted. It was a God-given blessing. It was a sacred thing that was being given to people. And then later in the New Old Testament, we read that the people of Israel provided God with the first fruits of their grains, with new wine, and with oil and honey. So new wine, it is a gift that God gives to us, and it's a wonderful blessing, but it's also a gift that can be returned to God. It's that good. It's that wonderful. New wine is a fitting gift to give God. Well, why is that? What was it about new wine back then that made it so wonderful, that made it so valuable? Well, we have to think a little differently because we go back in time. They didn't have the technology of wine bottles. They couldn't store wine in airtight containers. And so they'd have this wine, and you'd have your new wine, and oh, it would taste so good. It tasted so fresh. And even today, the new wines that you drink, the wines that are supposed to be drunk in the first 6 months, they're very fruity tasting. They're very fresh tasting. They have this tartness to them. They call it the tannin. That's really strong when the wines are young. This kind of wine, man, it gets your attention. And that's what these wines were when they were new. But then they'd put them into skins, and they get older and older, and they would keep fermenting in the skins. So it's not like a wine bottle where it's kind of done fermenting. It's aging, but it's doing some mellow things in there, mellowing out a little bit. But this wine's continuing to ferment in the wineskins. And eventually, it turns back. It turns into vinegar. Old wine is becoming like vinegar. In fact, when they were torturing Jesus on the cross, and he said that he was thirsty, that is what they gave him. An old wine that had turned into vinegar. The new wine was always fresh, was always delicious to taste. But here is what's most important for back then and for us today, and it's not something we think about either today. Of course, we have the wine bottles, that's different. Here's another thing that's different. We don't normally drink wine for its nutritional value, right? We're not looking at the wine. In fact, they don't even have the nutritional value on wine. They don't tell you how much vitamin C is in it, how much vitamin D is in it. They don't tell you about that. But for ancient people, that was so important. Wine was a way to preserve grape juice, and grape juice was full of vitamin C. And that's what you need in order to keep you from having scurvy and other diseases, to keep you from becoming malnourished in other ways. You needed to have that vitamin C. And guess what? That vitamin C was there most in new wine. As wine got older, the alcohol content would rise, the amount of vitamin C would go down. New wine is the most nutritious wine. And that's why they were drinking it back then. It was because of the nutrition. It was a way to preserve grape juice and to continue drinking it for months. Even when there were no grapes growing, you could still have the vitamin C from that grape juice as it's turned into wine. Last night, Elizabeth and I, my daughter, were watching a movie, and there was a guy in the movie, and he had this big jar, screw-top jar, and he had unscrewed it, and he was eating pickled eggs out of it. Pickled eggs, and my daughter was appalled. She was like, "What is he eating?" I said, "Oh, those are pickled eggs." Why would anyone pickle an egg? She wondered. Who would want to ever eat that? A pickled, hard-boiled egg? Well, she never had them, so she should try it before you say you don't like it. But it is a strange thing. I told her, well, that was very popular back in the day, when you couldn't preserve things, when you couldn't go to the grocery store and get the eggs you wanted and keep them in your fridge for a whole month. Here's a way that the people back, 100 years ago, could have eggs, could have them anytime, and they could get the protein that they needed from those eggs. Yeah, okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to get her to try a pickled egg, but at least I kind of got that in her head. And that was the same way with wine. Wine was a way to preserve something so it could be nutritious. Well, no wonder then Jesus talks about our faith as new wine, the most nutritious wine, the wine that feeds us the most, the wine that tastes the best, it tastes the freshest. Jesus said that our faith is like new wine. And if our faith is like new wine, then what is the wineskin like? Well, Jesus is being asked, of course, about his disciples, and he's being asked about one of their practices. One of the things that faithful people did back then, and that was fasting. And they said, people were asking, why aren't your disciples fasting? We're fasting, they're fasting, why aren't you fasting? Why aren't you doing it the way we're doing it? And Jesus said, well, my disciples have been fasting all of their lives. That is the way that they have always expressed their faith that they've had. But they have this new faith. And it's different. And it's growing. And it's changing. And it's fresh. And it's nourishing. And so they're expressing it in another way. They're expressing their faith not through fasting right now, but in other ways. And so Jesus talks about the way we express our faith, the way we live our faith out, is the container in which this new faith, this new wine comes into our lives. That's important. That's important for any of us who've ever felt, oh man, it feels like it's just the same old thing. I don't feel like I'm being fed by my faith. I don't feel like my faith is growing. I don't feel like I'm getting as much out of my faith as I used to. I feel like I'm in a rut. I feel like I'm going through the old routines. My faith isn't nourishing me in the way that it used to. What am I supposed to do about that? What can I do about that? Well, here Jesus is telling us, okay, the faith, that's offered to you. That's a gift. And it's going to be given to anybody who chooses it, anybody who asks for it. It's available to anyone, this new faith. But you had better have a good container to put it in. To have a good practice that brings this new, fresh faith into your life. It needs to be a new wineskin. If you have a new wineskin, you're going to get new wine. It's going to fill up in your life. It's not just going to go through you and out. It's not going to be something that you ask for and receive, but you can't keep in your heart, you can't keep in your life. You've got to have a new wineskin. And so if we're thinking, oh gosh, there's something's not right in my faith. Something needs to be different. I'm not feeling the way I used to feel. Well, friends, we got to think about how we can express our faith in different ways. Get some new wineskins. Old wineskins are fine. They're going to hold that old, mellower faith, that aged faith that has, that we can all use and that benefits us all. But we got to have some new wineskins too. We got to get some of this fresh wine of faith in our life. And how can we do that? Well, we change how we express our faith. We grow in how we express our faith. Now, there are all sorts of ways we can do that. How about through simply the impact we have on other people? Somehow I'm going to change the way I act, the way I present myself, in order to have a greater positive impact on those around me. And who better to start with than those you see every day? The people that are closest to you, your family and your friends and your coworkers. Think, gosh, how could I be more forgiving? Is there some practice of forgiveness that I have let fall through the cracks? Is there some old grudge that I've been holding? Maybe that's a new wineskin for me. And as I try to grow in my forgiving spirit and grow in the way I forgive others, I'm going to feel nourished by that. I'm going to feel more of God's faith, more of this powerful love come into my heart and fill it up through this new wineskin of forgiveness. Maybe it's encouragement. Maybe you're going to figure out how you can be encouraging to those around you, how you can lift them up, how you can be more positive toward them, how you can look at them and try to see their needs and then minister to that need that they have. All of that, a new wineskin in a way that we can grow in our faith. But boy, we have to decide to do that. We have to be intentional about it. It can happen accidentally, but it doesn't normally. What normally happens is we get into a rut with expressing our faith the same old way. Well, here's a chance to think about how we can have effect on those closest to us and strangers alike. To be able to think, well, how can I be of service to others who are in need? How can I have an impact not just on my circle, but on my community? And to think of ways to give of ourselves so that we are bringing that love, that care, that concern, that compassion that God brings to us and puts in our hearts, and they can go out into the community, go out into the world. Certainly service is one way we can do it. We can also do it here in worship. Worship is such a great combination of the old and the new. We come here and we know what to expect. We probably know about how many songs we're going to hear, that we're going to hear a scripture reading, that there'll be a children's moment. And that's good. It's good to have some regularity in worship, to kind of know what's going to happen, for it to be orderly. But then again, it's never the same each week. Each week it's new songs, different songs. Each week it's a new verse, it's new prayers, it's a new message. Sometimes we can start closing our minds to the new. We come here and we just sort of want the old, and so that's all we pay attention to. And so when the songs are sung, we don't study those verses from the songs. We don't think about them. We don't let them inspire us, these new songs that we are hearing. We hear some verse that maybe we've heard 20 times, and so we don't hear. We hear it the old way. We don't seek to hear it the new way. Even here in worship, to be able to grab onto the new, to be able to say, what in this service can I grab onto that I haven't gotten before? And in what way can that help me to grow and be a new worship can be a new wineskin for me, to let this new faith, to let this fresh wine come into my life. Yeah, service and worship, giving of ourselves, and forgiveness and encouragement. So many different ways where we can express to the world and then we can receive from it. That's one of the great paradoxes of giving of yourself, whether it's your money or your time here in worship, or your time helping other people and your energy with them. We think that we are told that we have to take care of, in order to grow, in order to feel good, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to focus on ourselves. But Jesus Christ told us throughout his life that is false. The paradox of giving is the more you give, the more you receive. said it exactly like that. The more you give, the more you receive. Pressed down, overflowing in your life. Just the same metaphor. With wine coming into your life, faith and love and inspiration all being something that comes only when we're willing to give it away. Well, a lot of people say, I'm at an age, I just don't want to, I want everything not to change. I want to have a good old-fashioned faith. I don't really need to have new things happen in my life, new faith. And they'll say this, I'm too old for that. Or I've been around too long. I've been in the church for decades. I've had enough of that. I'm ready for just to settle into one particular thing. Well, I don't think it's something we're ever too old for. In fact, I remember one guy, I was amazed at watching him. He was in his 90s. He was in his 80s when I met him. He was in his 90s the last time I saw him. And in his life, he'd gone through his life and he always sought out new ways to serve God. Throughout his life, new challenges, new projects. When I knew him, he was in his 90s. I think he was 93 years old. And he couldn't get out the way he used to. It was hard for him to go anywhere. He's pretty much homebound. And he could walk fine, but he couldn't walk outside. And he'd always loved that. He always loved walking. And so he started walking in his house each day. He made a point of spending an hour walking back and forth through his house. And he had one of those dining room, kitchen, living room kind of circles, and he'd walk around and around and around that. And he'd do it for an hour. And he thought, well, I'm just sitting here, I'm not doing anything while I'm walking, so what I'll do is I'll try to pray while I walk. And so he did. He started praying. Except when he started, he only prayed for like 5 minutes. So that's a long prayer, right? For me. A long prayer. So he prayed 5 minutes. That's a good long time. He'd run through everything he could think of. So then he said, okay, well, I'll start thinking about other things. I'll start thinking about as many people as I can. And he thought about his church. He'd always been very regular at his church. He knew where everybody in the church liked to sit. Right? He recognized, he sat there and she sat over here and said, oh, wait, that's true of this church too. We like to sit in about the same place, don't we? And so what he would do is picture in his mind a full sanctuary, everybody there, and he'd start going up and down each row and he'd pray for each person. Like 150 people. Pray for 150 people in that way. And then he would think of all the people he had known at work throughout the years. And he'd pray for each one of them. And then he'd think of a map of the United States and he'd picture everybody he knew in each state around the country and he'd pray for them. And then he would picture a map of the world and he'd remember all the news stories that he had heard about tragedies and hurricanes and all wars, all the great difficulties all around the world, and he'd pray for the people in each country that he could remember. And before long, he was praying for an hour. This is something he had done all his life. This is something he started when he was 93 years old. New wine. New wine skins. You want to feel that faith that's alive, that's fresh, that's nourishing. Then finding these new wineskins, these new ways to express our faith, express our creativity in our faith, express our compassion for others, express our love for God and our concern for His children. Finding these new wineskins. I'll tell you, when we do this in our life, we will recognize the truth of this old verse that I love. Honor the Lord all your days, and your barns will be overflowing, and your vats will be filled to the brim with new wine. Let us stop and pray. Loving God, thank you for the opportunity that you give us each week to come here and worship. Help us to open our hearts to what is new. Help us to find a new message here, a new word, so that we can go out into this week and we can be ready to have some new discipline in our lives, some new practice, some new way to express our faith, so that we can feel your Spirit growing within us, so that we can feel your love more keenly. Lord, help us to recognize the truth that the more we give, the more we receive back. And Lord, help us now as we come to this table, as we receive these emblems of bread and cup, as we remember you with the disciples, breaking bread and drinking wine together. And God, help us to remember all that you offer us, the strength, the courage, the forgiveness, the inspiration, everything you